Once upon a time in Lagos, there was a guy named Chidi. Now Chidi was a real looker. Tall, dark, and handsome as they say. But good looks were about all he had going for him. Chidi was flat broke and lazy as can be. Growing up, Chidi always got by on his charm and good looks. In school, he'd sweet talk the smart girls into doing his homework. After graduation, he bounced from job to job, never lasting more than a few months before getting fired for slacking off. By his late 20s, Chidi was still living with his parents, spending his days lounging around and his nights partying. His mama kept telling him to get serious and find a good job, but Chidi just smiled and said, "Don't worry mama, I'll marry a rich woman one day and we'll be set." Chidi tried his luck with the ladies, hitting on every pretty girl he saw. And sure enough, plenty of women fell for his smooth talk and handsome face. But as soon as they realized he was broke and had no ambition, they'd dump him quick. "Chidi, you're so fine but I need a man with plans." One girl told him, "Come back when you have a job and your own place." Another girl stuck around for a few months, hoping Chidi would change. But she got fed up watching him lay on the couch all day while she worked hard at her office job. "I'm not your sugar mama, Chidi," she yelled as she stormed out. "Grow up and learn to take care of yourself." But Chidi didn't let the rejections get him down. He figured he just needed to aim higher. Why waste time on broke girls when he could land himself a rich sugar mama? So Chidi started hanging out at fancy hotels and upscale restaurants, on the hunt for wealthy older women. And wouldn't you know, his plan actually worked. He charmed a string of sugar mamas. There was Auntie Folake the bank executive, Madam Blessing the oil tycoon, even a politician's wife named Chief Mrs. Adebayo. These ladies were happy to wine and dine Chidi, buy him designer clothes, and slip him envelopes of cash. For a while, Chidi was living large. But as he hit 30, he started thinking maybe it was time to settle down and have some kids. Problem was, his sugar mamas were all past childbearing age. Chidi needed to find himself a younger wife who could give him children. But he still wanted a woman with money, of course. Chidi wasn't about to lower his standards and marry some broke girl. So our man Chidi set out on a wife hunt. He put on his finest clothes, courtesy of Madam Blessing, and his most expensive cologne, a gift from Chief Mrs. Adebayo. Then he hit up all the trendy spots in Lagos where the young professional women hung out. Chidi turned on the charm, flashing his megawatt smile at every lady in sight. And sure enough, he got plenty of attention. Women were drawn to his good looks and smooth talk like moths to a flame. But as soon as they started asking about his job or where he lived, things would fall apart. Chidi tried to lie at first, claiming he was a businessman or worked in oil and gas. But he couldn't keep his stories straight. "Oh, you work for Shell. My cousin's there too. Which department are you in?" one woman asked. Chidi mumbled something about offshore logistics, and quickly changed the subject. Another time, he told a girl he owned an import-export business. "That's great," she said. "My company is always looking for new suppliers. What kind of goods do you deal in?" Chidi's mind went blank. "Ah, this and that. You know, general merchandise." The woman gave him a weird look and excused herself to the bathroom. She never came back. Word started spreading among the ladies to watch out for the broke, jobless guy with the designer shirts and smooth talk. Soon Chidi couldn't even get a date, let alone find a wife. He was getting desperate. His sugar mamas were losing interest in him as he got older. His parents were threatening to kick him out if he didn't get a job. Chidi needed to land a wife with money, and fast. That's when he met Adanna. She was 35, never married, and getting antsy about settling down. Adanna owned a chain of beauty supply stores and was doing pretty well for herself. But she was worried her biological clock was ticking. When Chidi approached her at a bar one night, Adanna was immediately charmed. Here was a handsome younger man showing interest in her. She'd always dreamed of being a cougar. Chidi laid it on thick, telling Adanna how beautiful and sophisticated she was. He claimed to be a struggling entrepreneur looking for an investor in his business ideas. Adanna ate it up. They started dating, and Chidi was on his best behavior. He'd show up at Adanna's shop to help out, though mostly he just sat around chatting with customers. He'd take her on dates to fancy restaurants, conveniently forgetting his wallet every time. Adanna didn't mind covering the bills. She was just happy to have found a good-looking younger man who seemed interested in settling down. After only 3 months of dating, Chitty proposed. "My love, I don't have much to offer but my heart," he said, down on one knee. "Will you make me the happiest man alive and be my wife?" Adanna was overjoyed. She'd been waiting years to hear those words. She quickly said yes, not noticing how Chitty's eyes lit up when he saw her expensive diamond ring. As soon as they were engaged, Chitty started hinting that he couldn't afford a big wedding. "Maybe we should just do a small ceremony at the registry office," he suggested. But Adanna wouldn't hear of it. "Nonsense. I've been dreaming of my wedding day since I was a little girl. We'll have a proper church wedding and a big reception. Don't worry about the cost, I'll take care of everything." Chitty tried to look reluctant, but inside he was grinning. He'd scored himself a rich wife who was eager to spend money on him. Things were looking up. The wedding planning began, with Adanna footing the bill for everything. She bought Chitty a designer suit, booked an expensive venue, hired the best caterers in Lagos. Chitty's job was to show up and look handsome. The big day arrived, and it was quite the affair. Adanna spent a fortune to impress all her business contacts and society friends. Chitty was in his element, charming all the guests and basking in the attention. As they drove off to their honeymoon, paid for by Adanna of course, Chitty was feeling pretty pleased with himself. He'd gone from living in his parents' spare room to married to a rich businesswoman. And he hadn't had to lift a finger. But Chitty's easy life was about to hit some bumps. At first, married life seemed great. They moved into Adanna's big house, complete with a staff of maids and a cook. Chitty spent his days lounging by the pool while Adanna was at work. When Adanna would come home tired from a long day at her shops, she'd ask Chitty how his job search was going. "Oh, I applied to a few places," he'd lie. "Still waiting to hear back. Why don't you relax and I'll mix you a drink?" Weeks turned to months, and Chitty was still unemployed. He'd long since given up any pretense of looking for work. Why bother when he had a rich wife to provide for him? But Adanna was getting frustrated. "Chitty, we need to talk about your career plans," she said one night. "I can't be the only one working in this marriage." Chitty turned on the charm. "Baby, you know I'm still building my business network. These things take time. Why don't we forget about boring work talk and go to bed?" He flashed his winning smile. Adanna sighed and gave in. She did enjoy having a hot young husband to show off to her friends. And Chitty was so good at entertaining at her business dinners. Maybe she could overlook his lack of ambition for a while longer. But things got more complicated when Adanna found out she was pregnant. She was thrilled to finally be starting a family. Chitty pretended to be excited, but inside he was panicking. A baby meant expenses. As Adanna's belly grew, so did the household expenses. She needed maternity clothes, they had to prepare a nursery, there were doctor's bills to pay. And through it all, Chitty still refused to get a job. "But I need to be here to take care of you during your pregnancy," he'd say when Adanna brought it up. Never mind that they had a full household staff to help out. Adanna focused on her business, working long hours despite her growing belly. She was determined to save up as much as possible before the baby came. Meanwhile, Chitty was living it up. He'd sleep until noon, then spend the afternoon watching TV and playing video games. In the evenings he'd go out partying with his friends, coming home drunk in the early hours. One night, Adanna had enough. She was 8 months pregnant and exhausted from a 14-hour workday. She came home to find dirty dishes piled in the sink and Chitty passed out on the couch reeking of alcohol. "That's it," she shouted, shaking him awake. "I'm sick of carrying this whole family on my back. You need to grow up and start contributing." Chitty tried to smooth things over, but Adanna wasn't having it. "I'm not just your sugar mama, I'm your wife. And I'm about to be the mother of your child. It's time for you to man up and get a damn job." Chitty sulked for a few days, but he knew he'd pushed Adanna too far. He made a show of looking at job listings and even went to a few interviews. But he'd gotten so used to his lazy lifestyle that he bombed every opportunity. Their son was born a few weeks later, a beautiful, healthy baby boy they named Shindu. Adanna was over the moon. Chitty was too, in his way. He loved playing with the baby and showing him off. But he still left all the hard work to Adanna and the nanny. Adanna took a short maternity leave, then dove back into work with renewed focus. She was more determined than ever to provide for her family, but juggling a newborn and her business was taking its toll. She begged Chitty to step up and help more with the baby. "I'm so tired, please just take night feeds for a while," she pleaded. But Chitty always had an excuse. His back hurt, he had allergies, he was a heavy sleeper and didn't hear the baby cry. So night after night, it was Adanna who dragged herself out of bed to tend to little Shindu. As the months went by, Adanna's frustration grew. She was working herself to the bone trying to keep her business afloat and care for a baby. Meanwhile Chitty contributed nothing but complaints. "Adanna, we're out of beer," he'd whine. Or, "Baby, I need some new clothes. Can't you increase my allowance?" Yes, Adanna had resorted to giving Chitty an allowance like a child. It was the only way to keep him from draining their accounts with his frivolous spending. Things came to a head when Shindu was about a year old. Adanna's business was struggling due to an economic downturn. She had to lay off some workers and was stressed about making payroll. She came home one day to find Chitty had thrown a party for his friends. There were empty beer bottles everywhere, cigarette burns on her expensive rugs, and the baby was wailing in his crib, diaper obviously full. Adanna saw red. She kicked out Chitty's freeloading friends and lit into him. "I've had it with you," she screamed. "I'm working myself to death to keep a roof over our heads and you're here partying like a teenager." Chitty tried to defend himself, but Adanna was beyond hearing excuses. "From now on, you pull your weight in this household or you're out. I'm not running a charity here." She laid down the law. Chitty would be responsible for all the household chores. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, everything. He'd take care of Shindu during the day so they could save on nanny costs. And he'd look for a job every single day. Chitty was shocked. This isn't what he'd signed up for. He was supposed to be living the good life as a trophy husband. Now his wife wanted him to be some kind of house husband. But Adanna was dead serious. She even drew up a chore chart and daily schedule for Chitty. She started asking for receipts to prove he'd been job hunting. For a while, Chitty shaped up. He grudgingly did the chores, though not very well. He'd take Shindu to the park, though he spent the whole time flirting with the young nannies. And he'd go to job interviews, though he never seemed to get any offers. Adanna was still frustrated, but at least Chitty was making an effort. She hoped that eventually he'd mature into a real partner and provider for their family. But old habits die hard. After a few months, Chitty started slacking off again. He'd do a half-assed job with the chores. He'd park Shindu in front of the TV instead of playing with him. His job search became less and less of a priority. Adanna's business was still struggling. She was working 16-hour days trying to turn things around. She had to dip into their savings to keep the company afloat. She came home late one night to find the house a mess, dinner uncooked, and Chitty napping on the couch while Shindu cried in his playpen. Something in Adanna snapped. "That's it," she said in a dangerously calm voice. "I'm done." Chitty looked up in alarm. He'd seen Adanna mad before, but never like this. Her eyes were cold as she stared him down. "Pack your things," she said. "You have 1 hour to get out of my house." Chitty started to protest, but Adanna cut him off. "I've wasted 3 years trying to turn you into a man. I'm done. You're nothing but a selfish little boy and I'm tired of being your mother." She threw a duffel bag at him. 1 hour. Then I'm calling the police to remove you for trespassing." Chitty realized she was serious. He scrambled to pack up his clothes and valuables. As he was leaving, Adanna handed him an envelope. "Divorce papers," she said coldly. "My lawyer will be in touch about child support payments." And just like that, Chitty's gravy train came to a screeching halt. He tried crawling back to his sugar mamas, but they'd all moved on to younger men. His own family was so ashamed of his behavior that they refused to take him in. For the first time in his life, Chitty was truly on his own. No one to mooch off of, no one to clean up his messes. He ended up in a tiny rented room, working as a security guard, the only job he could get with his lack of experience and skills. As for Adanna, things were tough for a while as a single mom. But without Chitty dragging her down, she was able to focus on her business and turn things around. A few years later, her company was thriving and little Shindu was growing into a happy, well-adjusted boy. Sometimes Adanna would see Chitty around town. He always looked shabby and unhappy. Part of her felt sorry for him, but mostly she felt relieved. She'd learned an expensive lesson about choosing a partner wisely, but in the end, she was stronger for the experience. So that's the story, folks. A cautionary tale about the dangers of laziness and trying to coast through life on looks alone. Remember, real success takes hard work and perseverance. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.